Hey YouTube, and welcome back to our mini guide series. Today we're going to be creating a scene management system. This is going to work over top of Unity's default scene manager. Give a little bit extra functionality that when you do things such as load a level, it'll give you a little callback to know when the level is completely loaded. And it'll handle things like adding scenes additively. So a good example is being able to have your main menu scene and then switching over to your game scene and then be able to load in the game scene and then unloading the menu scene. And then if you really want, you can hook in stuff like loading screens that are completely animated, which is super handy and something you can't do with the default Unity scene. So for our sample here, we're going to have 3 little scenes. And you guys can kind of use them as a little helper for how you guys would, whether it's like I was saying, a menu, a game, a pre-lobby, maybe the game's UI. I like to tend to have my UI in different scenes, that sort of stuff. So I'm here in the mini guides project. I'm just going to go ahead. You guys can create a new project if you guys like. And I'm going to go ahead and make a new scene. I'm going to call this one intro. So I like to have the scene manager in the very starting scene that I load up inside my game. It's going to be a singleton, so if you guys haven't watched this singleton mini guide, make sure you guys go back and check out that mini guide. It is posted on YouTube. And then you guys come back here because we will be using the singleton as well. So make sure you guys bring that singleton class in if you guys are starting a new project. If you guys are working like I am inside of like a mini guides project or your own project, hopefully you guys have it already. So we're going to go inside intro here, and we're just going to kind of delete the camera and everything. So our goal for this series, we're going to have 3 scenes. We're going to have the intro, scene 1, and scene 2. Scene 1 is going to have a camera and the lighting, and then scene 2 is going to have just a cube, just to simulate that when you bring everything in additively, you can kind of see everything and everything kind of interact with each other. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to delete everything in the scene, and then I'm going to save the scene, and I'm going to hit Control D if you're on Windows. You can also just right click and find like the copy or the duplicate or whatever. So I'm going to hit Control D, I'm going to duplicate this twice here. F2 to rename, or you can right click and rename, and just type the scene_1. And scene_2. And like I said, scene_1 and scene_2, they could be things like, I typically use them for login screens. And then I'll have one for the main menu. I'll have one for the actual game. I might have one for each map inside the level. Different stuff like that. So part of the scene management is we have to actually have these scenes inside the build settings. So if we go to File, Build Settings here, mine's empty. Yours might already have scenes in it. The most key one that has to be at the start is intro. So whether you do add open scenes or you drag and drop from your assets folder is your call. Just make sure intro is at the top, and you should be able to just kind of drag and reorder these guys. So just make sure intro is at the top. The other ones don't actually matter what order they're in, but the first scene that gets loaded in Unity is intro. So we're gonna add those 3 scenes to our build settings, then just exit out here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create, inside of intro, we're going to create just a code object. And when I'm dealing with singletons and stuff and I have multiple scenes, I like to, while I have my code object, I like to have like a dash to tell it which scene it's in. Just because with the singleton, they get moved to the don't destroy like section of the hierarchy. And if you have a bunch of just ones called code, it kind of loses sense if you're trying to debug or look at stuff inside the editor. So I'm going to call that one code intro, and then we're going to just have some code testing stuff. It's not a singleton or whatever, so we're just going to call this tester code for now. And then we're going to go into, make sure you guys save that. We're going to go into scene 1 here. I'm just going to create a camera. I'm going to put it at the default settings. So the default settings is 1 on Y, -10 here. And I'm going to just tag this as main camera, just because it's an empty scene, so it won't tag itself as main camera. We'll add a directional light, so I'll just leave the default, it really doesn't matter. And we'll save that scene. We're going to go into scene 2 here. And we're going to go into 3D object and click cube. I'm just going to leave it at, make sure it's at 0, 0. Make sure you zero that out. Otherwise, you won't see it on the camera. And if you'd like to make sure that your scenes are indeed being able to see each other, because one has a camera, one doesn't, you can drag other scenes. I think this is a 2017 feature enough. You can drag other scenes into each other, and now you can see. I'm just gonna untoggle that. You can see like the cameras came in, so now if you went in the game, you could be like, oh yeah, you know what, my cube is in the right spot. So if you have like a scene with like cameras and stuff, and then you have game levels which wouldn't have a camera, you can do that and bring in multiple scenes. I guess that's a mini guide instead of a mini guide. Okay, so we're gonna go back to intro here, and we're gonna start creating a couple scripts. So inside the code utility folder, we're gonna right click, create a C# script. We're gonna call this scene management manager. So if you call it just scene manager, that's the default in Unity, and you're gonna run into errors. So either call it like loader manager or scene management manager, your call. And then we're just gonna open that up here. There we go. So that's gonna open up there. It creates like your defaults. And then I'm gonna go back and just under gameplay here, I'm gonna right click and do test scene changing. So these are the two scripts we're going to be using. This testing one will simply, I'm going to double click and open that as well. So you should just need the two scripts. The test scene changing is super handy. It's going to just kind of test our whole system in general to make sure that this guy is set up properly. Okay. So I'm going to add a couple classes inside this file. You're welcome to move them into their own files, whether you create a folder inside Unity or utility, for scene management, and you put that in there. It's totally up to you. So the first one is that we need a data object for the level that's loading's data. And I'll go over that in a little bit, but we'll just kind of create the outline for it for now, and then you'll see why it's a little bit relevant. So we're going to use serializable. That's in system. So if you're not, I'm using a Rider IDE. Make sure you guys bring in using system here. Your Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code won't automatically pick that up. We're going to call this a public class level loading data. Let's leave that blank for now. We'll fill out the contents as we go and kind of explain. The other thing, this is what I meant. You can put this in another class. So we're going to create a public and static class. So it's reachable anywhere. So the idea for this one is it's just like a data class that can be called out anywhere. And this is our scene list. So when you're dealing with scene loading, unloading, that sort of stuff, and I go back to Unity here to kind of explain my point. You can load with their API. You can either load by the index number, or you can kind of load by the scene name itself, like the ending part. You don't need the full path, just the ending part. I'm going to go by the string, the name. It's a little bit easier because sometimes you end up tending to go like this and swap things around. And if you're using the index number, then it can get clunky. So I'll take the trade-off of the string probably being a slower process than the integer, but it's a little bit easier to work with. So we're going to create a public constant string. I'm going to call this scene_1. Like I said, this is going to be like your main menu, so you might want to call it like main menu. And then, like I said, it's the end part of that string, so it's the scene name itself. And we're going to do that for scene 1 and scene 2. So these are all the scenes you're loading in. Because we're starting an intro itself, you don't need intro in the scene list. It should never get unloaded. You never need to unload intro. So if you have like a bunch of like singleton managers, like an application manager or a database manager, stuff that comes in once and just never leaves your game, it's good to always put in these intro scenes because it never unloads. Okay, so we're going to create a couple functions. So we're going to delete these guys. We'll just write them from scratch here. So the first thing, like I said, this is a singleton. So we're going to remove mono behavior and we're going to call singleton. because we're already in utility there. Oh, I didn't change the namespace. It shouldn't have to bring in utility. If you put in a different namespace, you have to bring in utility for the singleton. And just like our singleton video, it's singleton, and then inside the little template area, it's the same name. Cool. And so we are gonna do the public. So we're gonna do a public override on the awake. Like I said, if you haven't watched the singleton video on why we're doing an override rather than just like a public void awake, make sure you go check out that video. It'll explain that we have functionality inside singleton that we need to call the base of, so now it has an override. Cool. And so we're gonna do the override. We're gonna do the public void update, so that's like a standard update. We're gonna have a public void load level, and we're gonna fill out the parameters here as well. I'm just gonna kind of just write down the definition of kind of what we'll be doing. So the idea is that the scene manager kind of has a load level and unload level. It'll initialize some stuff in awake. In the update, it'll keep track of levels we're unloading, that sort of stuff. And it'll fire off an event once it's complete. Okay, so we need a couple lists here to keep track of things. So the first thing we're going to keep track of is level loading data. So that's this class down here. So as we load a level, we're going to create an object for level loaded data. We're going to assign it to this list, and that's what gets updated in the update. We're going to call these levels loading. And then we're going to have another list, and this is going to be a list of strings. And this is currently loaded scene. So as things get loaded into the map, we're going to add them to this list, just so we can do checks. So the idea here is that, like, if you had a button that loaded the main menu and like the player click spammed it, it's not going to load multiple main menus and cause like system crashes and stuff like that. So that's what this guy is going to do. It's going to be super handy. Because right now, if you use like the Uni base system, you could call multiple main menu scenes or multiple game scenes. You could start running into issues that, well, would be an issue. Okay, so we're just going to initialize the two lists above. Just in the awake there. And then we're going to skip the update here for now. We're going to do the load level. So in order to load a level, like I said, we're going to be using the string name. Most likely, in our test case, you'll see it'll be scene-list.like scene1 that gets passed through here. So we're going to need string level name. I like to have an action that returns the level name when a level has been loaded. So the cool thing about this is that if you were in the main menu and you loaded into the game, you would call the load level for the game, and once that level's loaded, we'll get a function callback that we can unload the main menu safely. So this allows you, rather than waiting and that sort of stuff, this says, okay, you know what? The game scene has been loaded. It's now showing you can unload. Here's the function callback. You can unload whatever you want. Now it's up to you. So that's what the action is going to do, and we're going to call it onloaded level. And then I'm not going to show you how to do loading screens, but I'm going to show you where you would do the code for it. So we're going to have a little function called is showing loading screen. And like I said, the cool thing about this system is you could have animated ones where the other one doesn't. And we're going to default that to false, so you don't have to pass that parameter. Cool. Okay, so in order to load a level, the first thing we need to do is check to see if the level is already loaded. So I'm not going to be going too much into link and using link today, but we will be using link. I'm just not going to go into a full definition explaining. We're using a link, and you'll see that indeed brings in system link when you call this, and it's going to call the any function for this, and this is just like a lambda expression And basically its job, what it's doing is it's going to go through the list here of currently loaded scenes, which is represented by X. So each string inside that scene is going to be represented as X, and it's just checking that if X is equal to the level name passed in, then the value. So basically it's going to go through that whole list, and if any of the currently loaded lists have the same scene name as the one we're trying to load, it'll put this as true. Else it'll come out false. So we're going to say if value. We're going to return at this point because we don't want to load the level a second time, like I was saying before. And with the systems like these, I like to try and put a little bit of feedback, I guess, information. So we're going to do a debug.log format. I'm going to put our quotes there, a comma, and our level name. And we're going to say current level. And then in order to call, if you're new to this formatting stuff, anytime you have the squiggly braces followed by the index number, which is like an array, is each one of these commas. So the first one at the comma is 0. If I went and did like on level loaded or something, that would be squiggly 1 squiggly. And it allows you to just kind of format a string in a nicer way if you're new to that sort of stuff. So we're going to say that the current level, and then I did put in the name there, is already loaded into the game. Cool. Little feedback, it's going to return, it's not actually going to load the level, which is super handy to us. We're going to say loading level data. I'm going to do LLD just as a short because I'm a little lazy here. And we're going to say it's new loading level data. And then we haven't filled this out, but the last part we're going to do for there is level loadings dot add LOD. Okay. So we're going to just put a little thing that says fill out LOD, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so after you would create the level loading data object, you would save it into our list up here. The last thing we're going to do is if you had, if you were doing the loading screen, you do the function here. So turn on your loading screen here. So typically I don't have reference to, like, say you had a GUI canvas object for the loading screen that was inside the intro scene. I wouldn't typically have it saved or have reference here inside the scene management. I would have another singleton that's like my application manager that would have being able to turn on and off the loading screen. Like it would most likely be like application manager .instance .show loading screen or something. Like I wouldn't have the reference inside this little system. There's no point, and it's supposed to be able to be handled somewhere else. So I'll just let it do that. Okay, so we need to fill out the LLD here. So let's go down here. So we're going to be using a system that's part of the Unity loading level. So whenever you do loading level, we're going to be doing it asynchronously. It's going to be happening over time, not that specific frame. And what it passes to us when we create these asynchronous loading level calls is going to give us an async operation. And that's part of the Unity 8.async. It's just part of Unity engine. So as long as you have like model behavior and stuff in, you'll be able to get async operations. So we're going to have a public async operation. I'm going to call it AO. You can call it async operation. It's up to you. I'm just a little lazy. The next thing we're going to do is we need reference to the level name. I'm going to call it scene name in this case. But you can call it level name. And if I could do a capital N, that would be amazing. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be storing the onloaded level function callback. So that's we're going to be passing in the function callback for loading the level. It's going to get saved into this data object. Once it's done being checked and the new scene, say the gameplay scene, is loaded in, it's going to fire this callback. So we have three things to fill out. So let's go over here and fill this out. We'll do LOD.AO is equal to scene manager. So that's going to bring in, if you don't have this already, that's going to bring in Unity Engine.scene management. So that's the Unity built-in stuff for scene stuff. So that's scene manager. And that's why we didn't call our stuff scene manager as well, because we'd run into conflicts. And we're going to be using load scene async. We're not going to just be using the standard load scene. We're going to be using a load scene async. This allows our current stuff, whether you have animations or current main menu and that sort of functionality, to keep working, and this works in the background for us. In order for it to work, we're going to pass in the level name as well as a load scene mode. So there's two load scene modes. There's additive and single. If you wanted to, most people, when they start out and they're changing scenes, they'll use single. That basically replaces scene. If you're loading scene 2 in, it'll replace scene 1 fully from the game. Our system, because our management system is going to be handling stuff like that for us, and we have the added callbacks, we're going to be loading everything additively. So that means if we already have the scene inside the game, it's going to be loading in this scene in with it. And it's up to you as the developer to unload the other scene, which is all right because you get the callback anyways, so you know at least when to do it. You don't have to be like, oh, is it done loading? So we're going to set the scene name. It's going to be equal to level name. And we're going to set the on level loaded, and it's going to be equal to on level loaded. So it's an action you in theory could do plus equals, but it's only going to be one thing, one callback for this action. It's not going to go different places. So I'm just going to put equals. It doesn't really matter. And then make sure that you're adding it to levels loading. Okay, cool. Let's go down and we'll unload a level. So in order to unload a level, you're going to need to know the level name. So we'll bring that in. And I don't have a callback set up for when something's been completely unloaded. I just never found a use for it. So I guess it's up to you. So we're going to have a for loop. It's going to be looping through currently loaded scenes, which is a string right up here. And I'm just going to call it item for now. And then I'm going to say if item is equal to level name. So we do so what it's doing is going to go through the currently loaded levels. If we actually do have a level with the one you unloaded, so if main menu is already unloaded in your game and you keep trying to unload main menu, it's like, it's just going to give you feedback to be like, hey, this is already unloaded. Like, maybe you don't need to do that call here, sort of thing. So it'll help you a little bit there. We're going to call scene manager once again. You should have it loaded in by now. And we're going to do unload async. So you'll see, like, even they've deprecated their standard unload. They want you to use unload async. And we'll toss in level name, and we'll do that. And that's not going to be stored to anything, and we're just going to let it do its thing. And we're going to go to currently loaded scenes, and we're going to move this item. So we're going to just say remove, and we'll say item. And then we've already found the scene, so we can just return. You should never have duplicates. All scenes should be, in theory, unique naming. Yeah, so we're gonna call Unity Scene Manager to unload stuff, and then our little list is keep track of everything. We can just kind of remove it, and then we return, so we don't run into any errors when trying to continually to loop through the array and stuff. And we've removed an item, you sometimes run into errors. The last thing we're going to do is, in theory, if it didn't find your level that you're trying to unload in here, like I said, main menu was already unloaded a long time ago, and you keep trying to unload it. We're just going to kind of bring back like a log error format here, and I'm just going to give the player or the developer a little information to say like failed to unload level. Most likely was never loaded to begin with, or was already unloaded. And we'll do a comma, we'll do a level name there. Just some little feedback, because like when you make systems and stuff, you want to make sure like it has the error checking and all that jazz. Even if it's like your own stuff, it'll help you down the long stretch. Okay, so we've added a level. It goes into our array. We've unloaded a level. It'll check which ones are loaded. And the last thing we need to do is actually do like the updating. So per update, we're just going to do a for loop here. I'm not going to do the snippet. I'm going to do it by hand because we're going to end up doing a reverse for loop. So we're going to say I is equal to levels loading dot count, and then because it's array indexing, we're going to say basically the last item's count minus 1. And there's a couple ways to write like a reverse for loop. Like this is just the way I write it. There's a bunch of different ways you can write it. So if you have a different way you want to write it, then go forward just doing a reverse for loop. We'll say I is greater than or equal to 0 for indexing, and then we'll say I minus money. Minus. Okay, cool. So first thing we're going to check is if loading levels at I is equal to null. So basically the item that we're checking, if it's null, we can remove that. I've ran into cases where for some reason it's still in that list and was never getting removed. Maybe it's completed or something. And then what we're going to do is continue. So if you've never used continue before, basically it kind of just like stops code execution, but then like goes to the next index. Okay, so. And then it's like, hey, you don't need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to write down do levels loading at I.ao.is done. So the built-in Unity operation for async operation, it has an is done property. Way back when, before pre-2017, if you didn't have Unity Pro and you tried to do async, it would stop at 99 and would never reach is done. That should be fixed now. You should be okay on free version 2017 or plus. It could have been even further back. It was pretty far back when that was happening. So anyways, we're going to check to see if the async operation that's happening over a bunch of frames over time is done. If it's done, we're going to say, and this is a big one. We're going to say allow scene activation. So what it does is if this isn't set to true, it actually won't show the scene inside your game. Like the scene will be loaded in memory, but it will actually like not visually show. So we need to make sure that we set this to true. So I'm gonna make a little note that needed to make sure the scene, while fully loaded, gets turned on for the player. And that's just like a Unity thing. I guess you could load a bunch of stuff into memory and then pick and choose when you want to actually visually show it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our callback. So our function always requires a callback, so we don't have to check if it's like null or anything. And like I said before, this is the way I do it, but like in theory you could do like that. You can call an action just like with the quotes. I like when I have actions though, I like saying the dot invoke. Then I know looking at it in code that it was like an action of some sort. We're going to say level loadings I, and we're going to pass in the scene name. So basically we're going to say, okay, this guy is done. We're going to call the action that the developer wants, and we're going to pass in the scene name so they know which one was loaded. So I mean, you could load like a ton of scenes out. Like you could call the loading thing a bunch of times, and then this would tell you which one was loaded. We're going to say currently loaded scenes dot add. Because this is now fully loaded, right? So we're going to say scene name. And then we're going to say levels loading dot remove at I. And so that'll just, like, because we're done now, so then we're going to remove it. And if for whatever reason it is null, it'll do the remove up there as well. I've ran into issues where it's been null for some weird reason, so it just kind of cleans it up. And then just like down before, this is where you would, and I know there's some issues where you could run into this. I personally, how I formatted my code, I haven't ran into this issue, but this is where you turn off your loading screen. This is typically where I do it. I could see for issues, maybe you have two scenes going, and then if you hide the scene here, the second one might not be done. So you might have to play around with stuff, but how I've organized my code and flow and stuff, I find that turn your loading scene, hiding your loading screen here. It has been fun. And that could be something like, if I go down here and copy this comment, this could be, like I said, singleton application manager dot hide loading screen or something. And that's typically what I use for my games. And it's like a black UI canvas. It's in the intro scene, but it's not referenced in here. It's referenced in something called application manager, which is singleton. And hopefully by watching this video and the other one, you should be able to kind of do that yourself, hopefully. Okay, cool. So I think we have everything we need. Just a quick recap. We have the levels that are currently loading stored here. Levels that are loaded into your scene minus the original one. This is like intro won't be in this thing because you just like never touch it after it loads. Will be loaded into here. So that'll be things like main menu, login screen, map 1, map 2, whatever you have loaded. We initialize those. During the update, we're going to go through all the ones we're currently trying to load. If for some reason they're null, we're going to remove them just as like a safety thing. We're going to check if the ones loading are done. If they're done, we're going to do allow scene activation. That'll make sure that we can actually visually see. It's no longer just in memory. We're going to call the scene callback here. We're then going to add that scene name to what's currently loaded into the game because now it's being shown and that sort of stuff, so it's being currently loaded. And it's no longer loading, so we're going to remove it. And if you want to hide your loading screen here, you can do that. When you load your level, we're going to look for a level name to load. That matches what you call your scene name inside, and make sure that is inside the build settings there. We're going to pass in a little action that requires a string here for onloading level, and if you would like to show the loading string, you could pass in true here. You can just leave it blank because it's an optional parameter. Like before, we're not going to go too much over the link, but if this just says that if like looping through that whole list, if any of the items marked as X here is equal to that level name that's already loaded, and that we should already tell the player that this scene's loaded inside the game. This is safety checks for things like loading multiple login screens, multiple game levels, like just some safety stuff. We're going to create a loading level object which contains the async operation, the scene name, and the action for when it's been loaded. And we're going to add it to that list so it can be checked over time. This is where if you want to show your level, this is where you'd do it. And like I said, you wouldn't store the reference here. You'd store it in something like an application manager. Unloading level. Takes in this name. We're going to find it in the currently loaded levels list. If it is there, we'll unload the level, remove it from that list, and continue. If not, it's most likely you either didn't load that level to begin with, or it was already unloaded. Maybe unloaded a couple functions ago, I don't know. We're going to make sure this is serializable for the loading level data. Contains async, string, action. And our scene list, like I said, could be in a separate C# file. I'm going to put it here, and this will just contain all your scenes that you can load dynamically within your game. Cool. Okay, so let's swap over classes here. We're going to go and test this bad boy. So we're going to go into our test scene changing, and I'm going to just change the namespace here to gameplay. And we're just going to leave it as a mono behavior. This is just simply for testing. So what do I want to test? So the test here is that we're going to have level 1 be loaded. Once level 1 is loaded, we're going to load in level 2. I'm going to add in some functionality that if you were to hit the Q button, it'll unload level 2. So you can kind of see like, oh, loading levels and unloading levels and that sort of stuff. We're going to do scene management manager. So you don't need to actually use the Unity stuff. It's now wrapped into our little system here. It's a singleton, so you have the instance. And we'll do load level. We're going to do, because seamless is a static class, we can do seamless.scene1. And if you're familiar with like inline functions, that sort of stuff, we're going to be doing that. So that is, even though it's a single parameter, you don't need the little brackets. I just like it to know what it is. We're going to do the little parentheses here. I'm going to say that what the action is going to return us is a string here. It's going to be called level name. You don't need the data type or anything. And then you have the little arrow function. And it's going to be like saying, okay, you know what, this is the parameters. Okay, this is our function now with the curly braces. And now we can continue coding as if it was like a function. So at this point, we have loaded in scene 1. Now let's load in scene 2. Cool. And we're just going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to copy and paste. It's much easier. And we're going to say seamless.scene2. And you don't always need to actually like use your callback. And because we're inside, I have to call it something different. So I'll just call it ln. But I'm just going to leave this as blank. But you could do stuff like turn off scene 1 or something. There. Okay, so we're going to load in scene 1. Takes in the seamless name. Here's our action. You'll see that I'm not using true or false for the loading screen because it's not going to work. But in theory, if you wanted to show the loading screen, you could do that, right? Okay, so in update, we're just going to add some little input here. We're going to say input, get key down. And we'll just say keycode.q. Simply for testing. And we're just going to be testing the unloading of seamless.scene2. You can be unload scene 1 as well. It doesn't matter. Okay, cool. So that's our little testing stuff. And in theory, after we unload scene 2, we should be able to click it again and we should get the error feedback as well. So we're going to come into the intro scene. We're going to go into code intro and we're going to do our scene management manager. I don't know why there's 2 there. It's weird. And for test code, we're going to go into test scene changing. Cool. We'll make sure we save that, and we're always going to start with intro. So once you start dealing with multiple scenes and that sort of stuff, while most scenes should be able to run by themselves, just remember that you need the intro scene is the first one you start with. And okay, so things happen really fast. So what happens? So if we go back to our code on start, because the singleton stuff's always set up in awake, it's always there for us. We're going to load in scene 1. It's going to be very quick. There's not a lot of stuff there. But as soon as you start putting a lot of geo, it does take a little bit more time. And once it's done, it's going to load scene 2. So you'll see like what I was doing when I was dragging scenes into each other. You'll see that they'll start piling up here. And you'll notice that code intro gets put into don't destroy unload because it's a singleton. But you can start seeing everything together. So scene 1 has a camera and a directional light. And scene 2 has a cube. And together, we can see the cube. If I go into the game here and I hit Q, you'll notice that scene 2 gets fully unloaded. Scene 1, all their stuff is here, and the cube is now gone because it's part of scene 2. If I hit Q again, you'll notice we get a little error from our system that said failed to unload scene 2. Most likely it was never loaded to begin with, or was already unloaded. And so you get your little feedback there as well, and it'll tell you where in the script it was done. Cool. And that's the whole guide, I guess, for the scene management. The idea is that you break things like logins and menus and game maps and just kind of the gameplay, that sort of stuff, into its own scenes. It makes working with other people really easy. It works with things like Git and versioning control systems, like very easy, as well as just kind of managing your own game itself and breaking it out. Just makes it easier to work on little parts at a time when everything's not in one scene. So I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Just wanted to make sure I give a nice shout out to the people over on Patreon that help me support and help me do Twitch and YouTube tutorials. So thank you. And you guys will be in the following list. Jaron Frost. Hey everyone, if you guys liked the video, make sure you guys click that subscribe button, give it a like, and make sure to comment. It really helps out. And if you guys are looking to support the project further, I also have my Patreon, which will be linked in the description down below. Thank you, and have a good day.